Hello, this is Alan with Rustic Wood Floor Supply. Today I'm going to go over acclimation of the wood. There seems to be a lot of people who are confused about how it works, to get the best results, the processes, all that kind of thing. So first you're going to want to start with a good moisture reader, one that's meant for hardwood and for the OSB or the plywood. So something like a Lignomat or a Wagner meter, something like that, that's going to be able to allow you to change the wood species and the depth. Now regarding the pin and the pinless, truly that doesn't matter too much. I think the pinless is just as good as the pin at this point. And in terms of if you have multiple crews, I would definitely go with the pinless just because you're not going to have people breaking things. There's a lot less moving parts, if you will. So first things first, the moisture readers work off of basically a current, if you will, going through the wood, going back to the next pin. So bringing back a resistance level. So on different woods, there's different resistance levels. So you got to make sure to change your moisture reader to a different setting. Now that being said, if you use the wrong one, there's a way to reverse engineer it to make sure you have the right reading. But the easiest way is to make sure you have the right setting when you first begin. Now that being said, there also is usually a setting for 3/4 inch and 1/4 inch and that kind of thing. So once you have the right species, you then need to make sure also in the little booklet that you have the right species, that's the subspecies. So sometimes there can be like multiple ash ratings or little decimal point things. So like say an ash is a 0.60, it can also range to say 0.54, 0.68. You got to make sure you have the right species within the species. That will wildly change it. So like the other day we delivered an ash floor and the guy called me, who's our delivery driver, and he's like, hey, this isn't reading right. Well, I'm like, what setting do you have? And he said, I have 0.6, I think it was. Well, I looked up what wood it was and where it came from and the subspecies, and realistically it needed to be 0.65 for that specific ash rating. So once he did that, then it was down into the correct reading for our area. So that comes into a thing where we have to understand is each area of the United States has a different allowable reading per wood. So in, say, California on the West Coast, you're looking at 9 to 13% or something like that. On Florida, 9 to 13% again. And then say like in Idaho, you're at 5 to 7%. And that kind of thing. So you got to make sure, which I'll link below the video in the description, the chart, that you have the right amount that's allowed for that area. So let's say you moisture read white oak and it comes in at 9%, but you're in Idaho and Idaho is 5 to 7%. Well, that wood is technically too wet to be installed. So it needs to go down to 7% or below. Now, starting off, when you go to read things, you're going to want to start off with the subfloor. So you're going to do your OSB or your plywood rating 99% of the time. So let's say your OSB rating comes in at 6%. Your wood then needs to be read as well, and let's say that comes in at 9%. Now, first things first, you got to check and see if the area supports 9%, but for this, let's just say it does. If the wood is a 2 1/4 up to 3 1/4, it can be 4 percentage points different. So 6 to 9 is only 3, so you're good to go. Now let's say it's a 7-inch wide. That is only allowed 2% variance. So if your subfloor is 6, but your wood is 9, it can only technically be 8, so you can't install that wood. Now there's a few things you can do. If that 9% is within the rating, you can seal the wood with a liquid moisture so the subfloor has no bearing on anything. Or you can let it sit for longer and use the typical Aquabar or the tar paper, and you need to be within that 2%. Now let's say it's 2 1/4 wood. You do got the 4%, so you're fine. Ideally, you want to be, the lower the percentage difference between the subfloor and the wood, the less movement you're going to have. So if you're looking for a perfect install, ideally you want your wood to be the same as the subfloor because there is a variance there. So that means the house is going to shrink or expand the wood. So yeah, that is acclimation in a nutshell. So you need to, the points are, number 1, check your subfloor. Number 2, check your wood. Number 3, check the chart to make sure you're within those ranges. And then number 4, make sure that your subfloor and your wood is within variance, like I said, 2% or 4%. If all those things line up, your wood's not going to really move. If those things don't line up, you're going to have a problem. And like I said, you can use the liquid moisture barrier to mitigate those problems, but ideally you want your wood to be the same as your subfloor so you have no movement whatsoever.